for both Rachel and Allison, they are the two lone Italian American girls growing up in this Maine town. And their parents, for that reason, despite their parents being from completely different socioeconomic backgrounds, different neighborhoods, want these two girls to know each other just by virtue of the fact that they're both Italian American, which I think is a very Italian American thing. They find each other and sort of create family. And but these two girls, they start out friends, but then Allison, who is the wealthier of the two, is also the more confident and the nerdier of the two. She's an awkward person. And so Rachel works out in junior high that if she wants to survive and not be bullied, she's got to ditch Allison. So that's kind of where the story begins. And I put it in Central Maine because at the time, I mean, number one, I grew up in Central Maine. And so that's how I felt. That's where I wanted to put it. I really wanted to sort of imagine Waterville Junior High, which was where I was, and so I changed the name of the town to Waterbury, but it is essentially Waterville, and a lot of those Central Maine towns, I think. And of course, actually, two other books have come out about Waterville, Maine, just in the past sort of 3 months. So it's odd that there's this kind of weird Waterville, Maine renaissance at the moment for writers. But when I started writing, and I thought, there just aren't a lot of books out there from this perspective and from this group of people. You know, when we think of Maine, we think of, I mean, obviously Stephen King, but a lot of coastal Maine, and Central Maine couldn't be more different. And I think a lot of people who come to the coast, they don't realize that that this is a very for the most part really working class community. But Allison's father owns the construction company that is sort of builds everything in Central Maine, and so her dad sort of employs everybody else in the town, and for that reason, most of the kids in town don't like her. And she's villainized for her wealth, which is something that I also think is really particular um, to small towns and in Maine. You know, when I was growing up, I would watch all these shows of, Beverly Hills 90210 and all this stuff where the rich kids were the popular ones. And growing up in Maine, I felt so completely different. It was, you didn't want to be poor, as nobody does. But you also didn't want to be one of these sort of like conspicuously well-off kids either. There was this sort of middle ground, and so I wanted to write about that. I wanted to write about what sort of, when you're growing up, what you are and aren't allowed to be, and how we sort of adhere to these things as though they make any sense at all, and how it grows so that the story starts with them in junior high. Well, it starts with them in college, and they do these flashbacks to junior. We do these flashbacks to junior high, but it's really about how that cruelty and those decisions that are made at age 13, 14 are still affecting you at 22. There was a lot of world building in the sense that I don't think I went as far as to actually draw a map of how I wanted this town to look, but I was doing that in my head. And there were pages and pages of description of where everything was in this town. And you don't end up using it all because you don't need it all, but it felt really, really important to me, to know where the Walmart was in juxtaposition to the Dunkin' Donuts and how many Dunkin' Donuts there were, and the clientele that chose each Dunkin' Donuts. I had all of that, and you don't end up using it, but that minutia feels really important, and the fact that this is a town with one Walmart and three Dunkin' Donuts, I feel is a fairly apt description of a lot of Central Maine towns, but also I think gives you a real feeling for what kind of community this is. Uh, um, because I'm sure I think most people live in a town with a Walmart and three Dunkin' Donuts. So immediately you're being told that you're somewhere that you recognize, and it's not that different from where you live. And then from there, the fun part is just working out the politics of, okay, well, who lives in what neighborhood, and what does that mean, who they are to each other, because small towns are turfy. And if you live in the middle class neighborhood and these kids live in the affluent neighborhood, then there's a good chance that you'll never see each other, and you're not even a mile apart. So the fun part was creating the relationships of you can create a world, and that's wonderful, but as a writer you have to think of, okay, I'm going to create this world, but what does it mean? How do the characters how does this landscape affect the characters' lives? I knew that it was going to be big news. And so, because she is the heiress to this sort of Central Maine construction company, the Petrucci trucks are all over Central Maine. Everybody sees them. They know what they look like. And they know that, um, that Mr. Petrucci's daughter has been murdered. And, and really, I think there's a line in the book, which is sort of the underlying, um, sort of fear through it all, which is, if the Petruccis can't protect their daughter, who can? And so it was very, very much, everybody sort of realizing that this could happen. That this could happen to anyone, but also that it's getting the coverage that it is, in part because of who it is, and everybody. This was a town that didn't accept Allison when she was alive, and so now everybody also has this sort of guilt of, do they accept her in death? And that is one of the questions that a lot of the characters in the book are grappling with. It was really mostly about Rachel's reaction, and it's a very internal story in a lot of ways. So Rachel is in college, the editor of her college newspaper. She's the news editor, and when Allison's body is found, Allison is also a student at the same school. So these two girls really cannot get rid of each other in their lives. They've ended up at the same college. At this point, they're no longer speaking to each other. And when Allison's body is found and Rachel needs to, from a newspaper perspective, investigate it, she starts off with her colleagues on the paper essentially lying about whether or not she knows Allison. And a lot of the rest of the book, or sort of 2/3 middle of the book, is about sort of why Rachel's made this ridiculous decision to lie. And the first scene in the book is Rachel and Allison have both attended the same college party, and they're not speaking to each other. And Rachel, who is really at the beginning of a drinking problem, is just incredibly drunk, and chases Allison out of the party and shouts at her, and she ends up being the last person to see Allison. And so she, number one, is feeling incredibly guilty that maybe she could have stopped it, and is also feeling incredibly guilty about what she said. And so it's really, we learn why she said what she said, and we learn why she thinks she could have stopped it, which is ultimately, she couldn't have. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely the thriller aspect of, like, okay, is it somebody that we know who did this? All of these characters from the past, who might be involved in what's happened in the present. But all of that felt actually really quite secondary to just the relationship between these two girls.